appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Hostage fans, I'm sitting here in front of a beautiful young woman with one of the biggest smiles I think I've seen in a long time. I'm looking at a female warrior in front of me that is so vibrant. Karla, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you on today because, number one, I know you have a very, very powerful story, and I know that you've dedicated yourself to helping other people through your own personal ministry.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about yourself now and kind of what's going on in your life, and then we'll get into a little bit of your story and growing up and that and what brought you to this point in life. But tell me a little bit about yourself.
So today I am 34, married, 3 kids, 1 in college. I own my own cleaning business, cleaning houses. And I probably work full-time ministry.
Wow. So sounds like you're a busy woman, right?
Yes, always.
So you have to work, you have all these kids, and you say you have one in college?
I do.
Wow.
My 18-year-old just left to LSU.
Wow, so that's got to be a struggle, right?
Yeah, emotionally.
First of all, I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to sometimes admit that I'm old enough to have the kids that old. Or
It is, because I don't want to, being a woman, what woman wants to honestly admit their age and say, oh yeah, my 18-year-old is in college. I'm 34, so a lot of people would automatically think that I'm older, but I did have my oldest son when I was 15, so...
Wow, that's the same age my mother had me.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, so I see this beautiful, vibrant woman who's busy and is really active in a ministry. But, one of the things that I know about people, particularly the folks that I've interviewed for the podcast, is that sometimes what you see on the surface, really is a little deceptive when it comes to maybe what you might have been through as a person. So I know you have a story, but can you take the listeners back to maybe your childhood growing up? What was life like for you? And let's take a little journey together from where you started to where you're at now.
Okay. So I don't really remember a lot of my very young childhood.
Uh-huh.
The story goes from my family that I was dropped off at my grandfather's house by my mom, and my grandmother, which my grandmother and grandpa are both deceased now, but my grandmother found blood in my diaper.
Now, how so you still in a diaper, so you were really young.
I was a little, I was right at 2 or maybe under 2, I don't know.
Okay.
But I was still wearing diapers, and my grandmother found blood in my diaper, so she had taken me to the hospital. The doctors there, I guess, had determined I had been messed with, and my grandmother wouldn't let me go back to my mom. So for a couple of years, I stayed with my grandparents until one of my aunts...
Now, hold on, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Mm-hmm.
You said messed with, and I want a kind of clear understanding of what that means.
They could not determine if I had actually been, penetrated, but they do know that I was touched.
Okay,
to the point of bleeding.
Okay.
As a 2-year-old.
Wow.
So
that's not normal.
No, it is not normal. And like I said, I don't really remember any of it happening. I do, as I got older, I remember being scared of certain types of older men dressed certain ways. And it's funny about your past, how about the bikers and things, because that's what I would scream bloody murder at. Guys in those leather things on their legs, big black boots and kind of things.
You really understand why that was a trigger for you?
I had no clue. Never. I never understood it. And growing up, I never understood it because I didn't find out any of this information until I was older, obviously. Mm-hmm. But that's how life started for me.
Wow.
So I stayed with my grandparents for a couple of years, and one of my aunts that was sterile, she could not have any kids, she decided to legally adopt me, and that's what she did. She was married to another man at the time. He had a daughter, so I had a stepsister all of a sudden, which was really cool. We were both less than a year away in age, so it was like I had a new best friend. Life was actually pretty good growing up with her. I admit she was strict, and she imparted a lot of responsibility, manners, work ethic, cleaning up your room, doing the dishes, all that was very normal in my house. She was never abusive or anything like that. If anything, she was an awesome mom. When I got a little bit older and started growing up a little bit, things got tough between us. I had actually stolen a pack of her cigarettes out of the freezer, and I was trying to befriend this girl down the street, and she was like 15, 16 years old, and I was trying to look like the cool girl down the road, and so I stole a pack of her cigarettes, and I gave them to this girl. Well, the girl had smoked a couple out of them and then gave the pack back to me to hide in my room. So my aunt thought that I was the one smoking. And I really wasn't. Years later, I can be honest now. I really wasn't. But she thought I was. And so she immediately seen that as the first rebellious streak. Mm-hmm. And so that started to concern her. And then on top of it, it didn't really help the fact that she had gotten out of her marriage with her husband because she was cheating. And she moved in with this other guy. Turns out that this other guy was a complete drunk and he was abusive towards her, not me. And she started to tell me that my choices and me being in her household for her personally was interfering in her life. So she used the pack of cigarettes that she found in my room as the tip of the iceberg, okay, that's it. I'm not going to deal with you anymore. So she takes me to my mother's house and drops me off on the front doorstep and told me that she wanted me to know what it felt like to be poor.
So you never lived with your mother at this
No.
point, since you were dropped off at your grandparents' house at 2.
And during the time of me growing up until about 11 years old, the total time that I had ever really seen or spent time with my mother, you could probably chalk up into a couple of days.
Wow.
Over those years.
So here you are, at what age were you now?
I was 11.
11, going to be dropped off with your mother who had never been a part of your life.
Right.
Okay.
So it didn't take very long for me to learn what was going on in that house. I used to hear my mom and my stepdad fighting a lot at night, and I got curious. So one night, my mom left the house, and it was late. My little brother was already in bed, but I was, 11. I stayed up watching TV a lot of times. But usually when my mom would leave at night like that, she would come back really fast. She would make me go to bed early, and something just wasn't right. I just knew something wasn't right. And lo and behold, it wasn't. So she comes back home after her little quick trip, quote unquote, to the store, I guess you could call it. And she gets back in the house, goes straight to the bedroom, locks the door. And my stepdad's in there. And we lived in a mobile home. So in this mobile home, most people that have lived in a mobile home know what I'm talking about. There's a gap, a 1.5 inch gap underneath the door. So it'd be very easy for a child to lay on the floor and look up underneath the door. And that's what I did. I was very quiet. And what I seen on the other side of the door probably scarred me for life. I watched my mom dig in her pocket and hand something to my father, or my stepfather. And it looked like a little white pebble in his hand. It was crack cocaine. I did not know what it was. And he broke it in half, and he handed her half, and then he kept half it for himself. My mom went around her side of the bed and sat down and grabbed her whatever she was smoking it in, and she took her piece and split it in half again and put a piece in her pocket. And I watched all this. I did not know what was going on. And I watched my mom smoke whatever she was doing, and I watched my dad, or my stepdad, he put the whole thing on there, smoked it all at once. And then immediately they start like digging in the carpet and digging in ashtrays. And I had no idea what was going on. Just the look on their face, it looked like they were completely out of it, that they were not themselves. They did not look normal, and they definitely weren't acting normal. At 11 years old, I'd never seen this before. You know, growing up with my aunt, I was very sheltered. I do remember now and looking back, you know, now looking back and having smoked marijuana myself, I realized that my mom's ex-husband used to smoke weed in the house. Never, not once, had he ever acted like that. So I knew something wasn't right. But I kept watching, and I watched my mom pull the other piece that she had stuck in her pocket out. And she goes to put it on her pipe and smoke it. And my dad thought she was stealing from him. They start fighting to the point where he wrestles her to the ground and holds her by her neck and holds her other hand like this and lays on top of her to try and get the piece out of her hand, calling her names, telling her that she's stealing and hiding things from him and stuff like this. So I'm watching all this, and at that point, I got up and left. I couldn't take anymore. And I didn't just leave and go to my room. I ran away. That was probably the first night that I had ever ran away. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any friends. So I basically spent my entire night walking the streets. I didn't take anything with me. I remember it was kind of cold outside. But everything that I had at my aunt's, I mean, everything from my own bedroom set, you know, queen-size bed all to myself. I was now sleeping on the floor, and my mom was running off in the middle of the night, and they spent their nights doing things like this. And whenever they weren't there, I was in charge of taking care of my little brother, which was a lot.
How much younger was he at this time?
I want to say he was maybe 5, kindergarten age.
Well, so you were 11 years old, taking care of a 5-year-old, having to be the mom.
Yes.
Because your parents were essentially cracked out most of the time.
Yes.
Okay.
It got to the point where there were some days that we didn't really have groceries and stuff in the house. So me and my brother would walk to the little corner store down the road, and I would, like, steal a box of macaroni for dinner, or like steal a can of raviolis so that we had something to eat. I didn't know how to cook.
Because I would imagine, you know, if your
I knew how to cook macaroni.
Yeah, well, you know, I think what a lot of people should understand is that, you know, not only is there drug abuse going on, but what I hear now is neglect as well. And when somebody is using crack on a daily basis, that number one, it takes a lot of money to support that kind of a habit.
Yes.
And that money goes into their drug use rather than the necessities like food for your children, clothing, things, the not only the niceties, but the necessities.
Well, and the unique thing about their situation was they were what I would call functioning drug addicts. They would go to work every single day, and at night they were completely different people, whether that had been alcohol that night or later on after the alcohol turned into crack cocaine. So on the outside, to everybody else, everybody, whenever I actually tried and reached out to help from my parents' friends, nobody believed me.
I know that happens a lot more than what people realize, is looking into other people's lives. And I've seen this where people are sometimes even envious of other people. They see some things that they have, or they look at what they feel like is a perfect life, yet there's something completely different going on behind closed doors.
Yes. And that's exactly what was going on here in this case. My dad's friends, when I would tell them what was going on behind closed doors at nighttime, and I even got what I called evidence. Like, they used to get empty Coke cans or beer cans and smoke out of that. So they had to like make it that way, right? So when they were done, they would just crush the can and put it in the trash can by my stepdad's bed. I even got one of those out of the trash one day and took it to my dad's friends. One of his beer cans, nobody else drinks that kind of beer in their little circle, you know? And so but they still would not believe me. It got to the point where I even, as a runaway, getting picked up from the police, they would ask me all the time, Karla, why don't you just stay home? You know, it seems like you got a really nice life over there. Yeah, y'all might live in a little 2-bedroom apartment. You share a room with your brother, but, you know, at least you're not living on the street. Why are you running out to be on the streets? And I would tell them every single time the reason that I left. My dad is beating up my mom. They're both doing drugs together. I am tired of sitting at home taking care of my little brother. Like, I wanted the chance to be a kid again.
Yeah.
And I was being robbed of that, and I didn't know how to make it stop. So in my mind, the way I was thinking at 11, 12 years old was, if I run away, they can't leave because they're not going to leave my little brother by himself. That was my thinking. That if they can't be there for me, if I'm not there, they at least have to be there for him. That was my thought. And so that's why I constantly stayed gone from home, is because if I couldn't have the love and attention, because every time I was there, they would leave and leave me as babysitter, I thought that at least if I could force them to have to stay at the house, that they would take care of me.
So when you ran away, you know, like this, then I guess the police would look for you, find you, bring you back home, and so what was it like when you'd run away and come back home, in the home?
Same.
Yeah.
And nothing ever changed. They would put on this big show for the police and make it look like they were so concerned and loving and everything. And they might have been, you know, concerned for my safety or whatever. I don't know. But that still didn't discount, like, whenever the police left, you know, and the conversations that happened afterwards, or even the actions that would happen later on that night. Nothing ever changed. So, you know, being 12 years old and a runaway on the streets, you run into a lot of mess, a lot of hurt, a lot of exploitation, a lot of people taking advantage of your situation.
A lot of predators.
A lot of predators that are preying on your vulnerability. Especially being a teenage runaway when you're a minor. They know that the last thing you want is to be found.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because why else are you running? You don't want to be found. So in order to not be found and be hidden, have a place to stay, that costs something. Not everybody is church people, especially in the streets. And a lot of things people are not going to give you for free.
So they would help you out under the guise of helping you out, giving you a place to come. So what is that price?
Sex.
So at a young age, even before preteen, people were demanding sex of you?
Yes. To have a
Wow.
place to sleep at night. Just for that one night.
Now, when you say people, primarily just men, or were there couples? Women that were aware of that, or?
All men.
Okay. So they would take you home, have sex with you, and let you stay there.
Let me sleep in the bed, and the next morning I had to go.
Mm. Wow. So how long did this go on?
A couple of years.
So that was kind of normal to you then, right?
Yes.
There was a price to pay. You knew. And in some ways, I would imagine, as horrible as it was that you had been exploited at that age, I don't know, did it somehow make you feel wanted at that time?
Actually did.
Was that equivalent to love to you, or is that what
I
you
thought
knew
it
as love?
was.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. And it's funny because I can look back now and just be completely disgusted by it. But if I put myself back as a 12-year-old, that was the only love I had.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only love I ever knew other than my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that my mom didn't even, quote unquote, care about me enough to try to make a better life for me and be that nurturing, caring, loving person that I needed for guidance as a child. You know, the only thing I did have as guidance was my aunt, who is super strict, and, you know, it was never any, I know she loved me, don't get me wrong, but the affection was never there.
Mm-hmm.
I never got to go and lay in my aunt's bed and cuddle up with her on a Saturday morning before breakfast. No, that was not going on.
It doesn't sound like unconditional love to me.
Right. I never had that.
Mm-hmm.
So, running away, let's see. I started hanging out with this, we moved from the apartments that we were in to this little trailer park. Or no, we moved from the trailer park to these apartments, I'm sorry. And I started hanging out with this lady that lived down the street. And at first, she was so nice to me. She tried to treat me like my mom. Like if I came over after school, she would fix me something to eat. She would sit there and watch TV with me. She involved herself in my everyday activities. She would look out for me with, like, my circle of friends or people that I thought were friends. She just always seemed like she had my best interest at heart.
But just something that was unfamiliar to you, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know how that love felt coming from, like, my mom, I thought she kind of took that place at that time in my life. Even to the point where I started calling her mom. So a little bit into our relationship, she starts introducing me to her friends, and they're all younger, like way younger. Like, this lady is 33, hanging out with kids in high school. I kind of thought something was a little off about that. But I didn't really care because she was treating me like I was her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I never really had. And the thing is that to everybody else in her circle of friends, she would portray me as her daughter to them. So that, to me, made me feel wanted and loved and like $1 million because finally somebody cared. So she starts introducing me to all these older guys because I'm only 12 and, you know, I'm not even in high school. But the guys that she were hanging out with, high school, maybe a little bit out of high school. So she starts taking me to parties and slowly introducing me to smoking cigarettes, smoking weed. I remember even trying cocaine with her. And back then, I didn't even know that that was basically the same thing that my parents were doing. I did not know because I was not educated on things like that. So I started doing little experimenting with things, and I was still what I considered a virgin. I mean, obviously, at a young age, I was messed with, but, personally, for me making that choice, I was still a virgin. So she had taken me to these parties, and this is right before I started having to sleep around to have a place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how it led to that and how it was, in my mind, okay. She takes me to a party, and they got me really intoxicated, probably the most intoxicated I'd ever been. And I woke up later that night in a bed. I remember going back to the room with this guy that had been just kind of giving me attention all night. And his name is Jason. I still remember that. And he takes me to the back bedroom, and I don't really have a lot of memory of what happened. But I do remember coming to, and I was in a bed, and underneath me was just the sheets, like the whole mattress, everything was just soaking wet. That's all I remember, and I was naked. So I remember that part of it, but that was basically the first time I had sex, and I know that that's what happened. I walked out of the room, and like everybody was staring at me that was at the party. And I remember like her coming up to me and like celebrating. Like she was happy that this happened. I felt very exposed. I felt like somebody had took advantage of me. I felt like maybe the decision wasn't really mine because I don't really remember a lot of it or of what happened. And like it didn't seem like something that I would have wanted to enjoy. Okay, I don't really know how to explain.
But she was trying to make it out like it was something to celebrate.
It was something
like
to celebrate. Like it was awesome. She was so excited, and I didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So the next party comes around, and I had ran away from home. And, like most nights back then, I spent majority of the night walking around, just kind of in my own thoughts and not even really looking for another place to go, just trying to be away from everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up running into her. I was walking, and I seen her somewhere, and they were going to a party. Obviously, I get in the car and go with them. And, she ends up leaving the party with me, and she was telling me that she wanted us to go somewhere else. And this was close to Galveston. Me and her left to go to Texas City. And I was already a runaway, so I was like, oh, cool, we're going to the next town over. None of the police officers know my face over there. Cool. So we get to Texas City, and she pulls up at this house looked abandoned. Like, boards were falling off on the outside. Like, it was bad. And it looked like nobody even lived there. The windows were all blacked out and stuff like this. And we walk around the house and go to the back door, go inside, and there's a whole bunch of people in there. There's guys on the floor playing dice, guns sitting around them, piles of money sitting in the middle of the floor. There's like 4 or 5 guys sitting at this, like, supposed to be a dining room table, but it's got drugs from one side all the way to the other. And they're sitting there, like, with scales and stuff and weighing stuff up and all this kind of craziness. And I was 12. So I walk in and see all this, and immediately I thought of my mom and my dad because the drugs on the table looked very familiar. And she came back and she gives me some weed. So I'm sitting there and I'm smoking, and this guy across the room is like staring at me. And she even leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Hey, I think he likes you," like stuff like that. And she gets up before I can even say anything, and she goes over and she's talking to him, and she comes back over and sits down and starts telling me that he thinks I'm cute and he thinks I'm very pretty and, you know, things like that to kind of, I guess, get the conversation rolling. And he comes and sits by me and talks to me and, you know, flatters me, makes me feel so pretty and beautiful and everything. And the next thing you know, we're going upstairs. After we had sex, I walk back downstairs and he goes over to his little corner where his stuff was, and I seen him hand her the exact same drugs that I seen my mom and my dad holding that night, which was crack.
Wow. So she delivered you there to him in exchange for drugs.
The same drugs that I was running away from.
And you kind of, in that moment, understood what was going on when you saw that happen?
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue.
You saw it happen, you just didn't put two and two together?
Yeah, it never... I remember feeling like I had been used. I remember feeling like I was dirty. And I remember just, I felt used. Like, why did she do that? Like, she created that whole little scenario for her gain, for herself. And I felt like I honestly felt like she manipulated me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know that there was a word for that. I didn't know that there was, I just thought that maybe that was what parents are supposed to do, because look at what I had at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't sound like you had any kind of role models to measure that by.
No, not even close. So, obviously, the one time turns into another time, and before you know it, she has me doing the drugs. She has me out on the streets. And it got kind of bad. There was a lady in the car with us that was 6 or 7 months pregnant, smoking crack, like for days. I didn't even know that the girl was pregnant until the lady I was with had started telling her that she needed to eat something, that she had to stop at least for a day so she could eat something. And I had no idea why. You know, I'm just kind of in the back listening to the conversation. Sure enough, we dropped this girl off at this guy's house, and he had went out and got her like a big bucket of chicken and all this kind of stuff. And so we're sitting at this guy's house and we're eating, all of us. She's like forcing me to eat. I told her I didn't feel hungry. Didn't know that that was the drugs or nothing. Like, it wasn't even on my radar. I had no idea why I didn't feel hungry and I hadn't eaten in 3 or 4 days. Did not know. So we sit down and we all eat. And I tell you, just as fast as this girl sat down with not showing pregnant, as soon as she ate something, she stood up and you could tell she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And it scared me. It blew my mind. And it hurt all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like the way that that lady was acting would have been right up my mom's alley.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up picking up this guy at the gas station one day. And the lady I was with and this guy, when they seen each other, they were like long lost friends. Like they had not seen each other in forever, like years, but that they were best friends. Like you could tell right off. And I didn't know this man, nothing about him, didn't even know his name, still don't. But he gets in the car with us, and I remember he lit a joint and passed it to me right about the same time. And this is like we pulling out of the gas station parking lot. You know, you're not even a block away yet. He pulled out the joint, lit it, handed it to me. Next thing, like before I can even put it to my lips, she told me to throw it out because we were being pulled over. So I did. Chunked it out the window, made sure my seatbelt was on, but the thing was, I knew I was a runaway. And I told her, I was like, what am I supposed to tell him? It's like, if I use my real name, then they're going to take me to jail. She said, tell him that you're my daughter. And I was like, your daughter? She was like, yeah, her name is Crystal. I don't want to say her last name because I don't know, but it's a Cajun last name. I didn't know how to spell it, okay? She tells me the birth date, October something, and so that's the name I give to the police. I told them my name was Crystal, and I give them the last name. They asked me how to spell it. So I spelled it to the best of my ability, and the police officer said, wait, can you spell that again? I spelled it I spelled it a whole different way the next time. So he knew right off that something wasn't right, something wasn't adding up about my story. So lo and behold, a little bit of time goes by, and I finally confess, I'm Karla Soloman. I'm a 12-year-old runaway from, next town over. So they take me down to the station. They call my mom. Well, at the police station, this police officer that took me to the station, he asks me, he was like, Karla, do you have any idea who that man was in the backseat? I said, no. And I kind of had attitude, like I was so tired of cops telling me this and this and this, and to stop running away from home, and, just so much at that time, because every time I had reached out to the police and told them what was going on in my house, nothing ever got done about it. So whenever this cop is trying to tell me, a 12-year-old know-it-all, what to do, or, trying to basically show me what was happening, but I was too ignorant and too full of myself to hear it. He tells me, he's like, well, he gets down on my level. He sits down next to me and he looks me straight in my eyes and he's like, I'm going to tell you exactly who that man is. He was like, whether you want to hear it or not. He was like, that same man that y'all picked up at the gas station a week ago got out of prison. He spent 15 years behind bars in Texas for raping and killing a 14-year-old girl on the Texas City Dike. Which Texas City Dike, I don't know. I mean, some people don't know, but it's like this long road that just kind of is, there's water on both sides. So they call it a dike, but it's kind of a pier, but you can drive on it. So a lot of people go out there fishing. So the cop tells me all this, and obviously tells my mother also what kind of person was in the back seat. And my mom freaked out. So she had told me that I was not allowed to go out with that woman anymore because obviously I was caught with her. And even though stuff like what had happened with her happened, I was still trying to go see her. Like, even after I went home, came off the drugs and, start going back to school and try to get back in my mom's good graces, trying to behave for a little bit so that they would back off and trust me a little bit, all the reason so I can run away again. I mean, it was a never-ending cycle. That's exactly what I did. I would come home for a week or two. I would gain their trust just a little bit to where they would be like, you know what, I think you're doing good, Karla, and, I think we're going to go out tonight and whatever. There was one time I even tried to run away with my brother. I mean, it was a constant thing. I would gain their trust just enough to leave. So I was still trying to go back to this lady. And it wasn't until I met her real daughter that I had given the fake name to the police that I stopped hanging out with her. Her daughter, back then when I talked to her, was 18, 19. And through her tears and sobbing, she told me on my bedroom floor that all of her life, her mother did that to her.
Wow.
And it goes even more to say that whenever she turned 18, her mother sold her to her old pimp so that she could be released. And the girl was still being controlled by her pimp, by her mother's old pimp, because he was making her work at the strip clubs. That's what she was. She was a stripper. She was the one that used to give me all these cute clothes to wear to these parties and stuff. And it wasn't until then that I realized not really what was going on, but I knew that I did not want to be that same girl. So I stopped hanging out with her. So at that point, though, I didn't have somebody to tell me what to do or who to be with, where to go, how to go, any of that. Because that's kind of what she did. She was kind of like my mom. So if I wanted to go over there and she didn't think it was a good idea for whatever reason, I wouldn't go. So having that, I guess, freedom all over again, that's when I was left to kind of fend for myself. When I would run away at this point, instead of being gone for 2 or 3 days, I would be gone for weeks. No contact with my parents or my mom, nothing. I was good at running. I was good at hiding. And I was even better at being stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of when all of the sleeping around with men had to happen. It was a no-brainer at that point for me because I knew that everybody wanted something.
And that was kind of survival for you. I mean, you
It
knew that was
was.
the price to pay. That was the only currency you had at that
That's
point.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can honestly remember sleeping with a guy in his car in the McDonald's parking lot for a chicken nugget meal because I hadn't eaten in 2 days. For a chicken nugget meal. Am I proud of that? No. Did I know any better? No, I didn't. I wish I did. I wish somebody would have cared about me enough to teach me and care enough to protect me. But that didn't happen. So the same guy that I'm talking about, I ended up getting pregnant at 14. My aunt told me that she would allow me to come back home if I had an abortion and that she would pay for it. I said no. I don't know what it was, but I knew that wasn't right. I myself could not handle knowing that I did that. I couldn't. And I mean, I was never a big kid person as a child. Like when I grew up with my aunt, other than my stepsister that I had for a very short time, I was an only child with her. So it was just me. Whenever I went to my mom's house, it was me and my little brother. My older brother didn't live with us, or my stepdad's daughter. It was just us two. I knew I loved my brother, and he was, he was young. So it was kind of like the only experience I had with kids was my little brother. But I didn't have a place to go. And I knew that I would need care, and I knew I would need a safe environment to be in when I was pregnant, so that I could have a healthy baby. Like, I knew that. I learned that in home ec, And so I told this guy that I had slept with maybe once or twice that I was pregnant, and I thought it was his baby. And it was a lie. I knew it wasn't his. I don't know why, but I just knew the timeline. Nothing matched up, but he believed me. So I went with that. He was 22, 23. I was 14. And his mom and dad allowed me to move in with him. He stayed in a little RV right next door to theirs. And they helped me get medical attention and everything. I had a healthy pregnancy, had some issues with delivery, whatever, but I was 15 and a mom. Now, when my son was first born, you couldn't really tell. It wasn't that noticeable. But as he started to get a little bit older, into toddler age and everything, you could kind of tell that was not his kid.
Oh, wow.
This guy was Caucasian that I was staying with, and my son was clearly mixed.
Oh.
Clearly. Curly black hair, olive-colored skin, brown eyes, like there was no mistaking it. You couldn't even have passed him off for Hawaiian or anything. Like, there's nothing in your bloodline that went back that far that made him look that way. Trust me.
So did he start to question it?
So he started to question it. And finally, whenever I came out with the truth and told him the truth, my son was probably 4 years old. We had already relocated to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, made a life out there. He never worked throughout our whole relationship. As soon as I turned 15 and was able to work, I worked and took care of everything. He watched my son whenever I wasn't there so that I could work. So not only was I taking care of myself and my son, I was taking care of a grown man that had full ability to work but chose not to. So the truth came out one day, and I got really mad. Like, I was ready to go. I didn't have a place to go, but I was ready to leave. I knew something. It was kind of like a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't really know what it was, but I knew I needed to leave. Like, I had that urgency to leave. So I had started packing my stuff. I just grabbed trash bags and I started throwing me and all my son's clothes in there and just like getting everything ready. And he walks in the house. He had been with his mom all day. So I'm getting all my stuff ready. He comes in the house and he asks me what I'm doing. And I told him I'm leaving. It's like, I know that you don't want me here because of my son. Like, I can clearly see that. But I also knew that he didn't want me to leave because I was the one paying the bills, So he was kind of putting up with whatever he had to in order to not have to go to work, which was sad. But so I told him the truth. I was like, you know what? I didn't know how else to push him away and cut that tie. So I let him have it. I told him the whole brutal, honest truth, and he didn't like it, so he pushed me down on the bed, and I had a bunch of stuff like laying out on the bed, shoes and purses and clothes and belts. And he grabbed one of the belts, and he had wrapped it around my neck and was trying to choke me. And he drags me off of the bed and into the bathroom close to the bathtub. And he's holding the belt from the back while he's pushing my head into like where the tub area is, and he starts running the water.
Thanks for tuning in to the show today, and don't forget, this is just a first in a 4-part series. Please tune in to listen to the second, third, and fourth part where Karla will continue to share a glimpse into her life and what brought her into the sex trafficking industry and how she was ultimately able to find her purpose in life.
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.